Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. I'm also the creator of the online public speaking course, Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about it, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Rebecca White. She is the CEO of Engineers of Tomorrow, an organization whose goal is to talk differently about the STEM professions to kids with a focus on engineering, although I think that's rather obvious since engineers is in the title. I'm not even sure why I even bothered saying that. She worked in manufacturing positions before moving into the nonprofit world. I'm interested to learn more about what prompted the move from for-profit to nonprofit, her work with Engineers of Tomorrow, and the ways in which public speaking has benefited her. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So from the bit of research I did on you, I saw that you got a degree in chemical engineering. Where did the interest in getting that degree come from?
That started because when I was in about grade 3, I lived in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, and there is a university there, Queen's University, and my parents signed me up for a summer camp called Science Quest. And that camp would be referred to as a STEM camp. At the time that I went there was no such thing as STEM camps. But it was hosted at the university, and the instructors were engineering students. And that was my first exposure to the world of engineering. And I was just like in awe. I'm like, okay, this is great. I want to go again next year. And the next year, I ended up signing up to be a junior counselor when I was in high school. And it's really interesting, actually. It's a really kind of formative part of my story, my path that I chose. I give Science Quest a lot of credit for some of those decisions I made because I didn't have any external influences. Like, my parents were teachers. I didn't know any engineers, but I had that reference point from Science Quest. And that's what led me to study chemical engineering at Queen's.
Okay, nice. So now you're at Queen's, you get a degree from there, and now it's time to get a job. It's time to start working. I mentioned that you worked in manufacturing. Was that the goal, or did you just kind of fall into manufacturing?
So I was one of those kids that got the message about engineering that, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. I talk to kids about that now. I'm like, look, you get asked that question all the time. What do you want to be when you grow up? And guess what? It's okay to not know the answer, because I remember feeling a lot of pressure around thinking I had to know the answer to that. So I was one of those kids. I was like, I really don't know what I want to be when I grow up or do. And so I just sort of followed along the path of, I got my degree. While you're at, usually in your end of your third year, fourth year, you start interviewing. If you're lucky enough, you might get to try and do some internships or co-op programs to start exploring a little bit. And so I landed in food manufacturing after I graduated. It was relatively close to home for me. I worked for Pillsbury in Trenton and got to make like Tim Hortons cookies and croissants and that sort of thing. And that's sort of how that all happened. It was honestly not a lot of thought behind it, other than, well, I know I'm good at math and science, and I've gone through and I've gotten this engineering degree, and these are the types of companies and organizations that are reaching out to find engineers to work for them. So I guess this is what I should do.
Yeah. I kind of had a similar type of experience when I graduated from school. I worked in medical devices, and I got a degree in biomedical engineering. So it just seemed like a natural fit to go into medical devices with that type of background. I'm always kind of interested to hear from people who maybe they make a different type of decision. Maybe, they start off in a chemical engineering degree, and maybe while doing it, they realize maybe this isn't for me. And then, but then they still finish the degree though, but then they have to figure out what they want to do next, and maybe chemical engineering isn't it. But it sounded like for you went into food manufacturing, and having this chemical engineering degree seemed to be really it was in line with what the work was you were going to do eventually.
It was in line. However, I will say that my first role out of university was a leadership role. I was hired as a supervisor, basically a shift supervisor. And so rewind all the way back to my days of Science Quest, I did actually end up working as a Science Quest instructor when I went to Queen's University. And so, we'd be taking the kids around and kind of, managing them all day. And I still remember when I'm young, I'm in this leadership role, I'm having to give direction to other adults now that are working in the kind of on the manufacturing floor. And I remember thinking that some of the skills I gained and the experience of working at Science Quest, some of that was what I leveraged as a shift supervisor. Not to say that the the people working there were behaving like children, but the experience and the skills of thinking about how you have to talk to people and how you have to, more of those softer skills, right? That aren't really traditionally taught in the engineering curriculum.
Wow. You're the first person that I've spoken to who, once they left school, had the responsibility of managing others. I mean, most of the people that I talk to, their first job is it's grunt work, being an individual contributor doing something. I was a research associate for a couple of years with that first job. But out of curiosity, just coming out of school, were there any kind of difficulties that you had in managing people who I'm sure were probably at the company for many years?
Oh, absolutely, right? You're this young kid, right? Imagine these people that have been working there for years and years, and they're like, well, geez, what is this young kid going to tell me what to do? Like, I don't, so you had to, I was really fortunate that I had a co-supervisor who mentored me through that and helped me learn quickly that, things like listening, for example, people just wanted to be listened to sometimes. So I was really fortunate to have that mentorship for that piece. Because you're right, like coming out of school and immediately going into a position where you're in a leadership role is, I guess it is a little bit unique, but it did really inform my path. I ended up, as I worked through the rest of my kind of manufacturing part of my career, I was always in some sort of leadership type role. People are often really surprised also to find out that when I've done like the Myers-Briggs, the Myers-Briggs personality test, where you classify yourself with the different letters. And I am definitely an introvert. And when you have to be in those leadership roles, you have to use more of your extroverted tendencies and skills, right? So people are always surprised. They're like, no, you're an extrovert. Like you stand up and you talk in front of the whole, like the whole production department or whatever it was. And I'm like, well, yeah, I can do that because it's a skill I've had to learn, and it's like a muscle I've had to build. But the way I recharge is by being alone to myself. And that's where my kind of introverted tendencies come through.
Did you say that you had a co-supervisor?
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean the both of you managed the same people?
No, it was basically split up. The way that this particular facility operated, it was like it was big enough that you needed 2 supervisors to manage the amount of people that were there. That, at least that's the way they had it set up.
Okay, I got you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So now you've worked in food manufacturing, and the next obvious step is to become CEO of Engineers of Tomorrow.
Of course, right?
Yeah, that's a natural progression. So out of curiosity, how did that opportunity present itself?
Yeah, so I spent more than a decade. I transitioned out of food into pharma, and that was just a case of moving location. So I had been in Trenton I was there for just about a year. Um, at the time, the guy that I was dating, who is now my husband, got a job in Toronto. So I followed him there and ended up in pharmaceutical manufacturing for, like I said, over a decade. And we carried on that sort of typical path that you would expect, right? I had my engineering education, I had a good job, we got married, started having kids, and I got to a place where I was like, okay, now what? What's next? I feel like I've gotten to the end of my list. And I'd had some really valuable experiences in my time working in, slightly different roles in those different industries or similar industries, I guess. And I was just at a place where I was doing a lot of thinking, reflecting on, what is next? And a fun little trick is when you do have kids, they ask you some questions that seem really innocent and honest, but they get you thinking. So the kids were obviously at an age where they ask why a lot, right? So they're like, Mommy, why do you have to go to work? Why do you have to leave us? Why do we have to go to daycare? And of course, you start off by answering that, well, because I have, people need me at work and we have to make money and all that. And then you're like, well, wait a minute, like, do I really need the money, or could I find the money in a different place, or like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And so it really just got me thinking. And so I spent a good year, I would say, reflecting, doing my own sort of research, thinking about what I wanted to do. I did actually make a shift. I left pharmaceutical. I went back to food manufacturing in a role that I thought was going to be better aligned with some of those whys. And it was. I was able to really engage in a different way. I started doing some Lean Six Sigma work and got to implement like a TPS system. Which was a lot of fun. And then what just ended up happening is through that kind of exploration stage, I reconnected with someone I had worked with at Science Quest. So in fact, it was the person who hired me at Science Quest. Her name is Erica Lee Garcia, and she is the founder of Engineers of Tomorrow. And so she had responded to one of my kind of reach out emails that was just kind of exploring the different options. And when I heard about what she was doing and I heard about Engineers of Tomorrow, and I remembered the energy I had when I was working at Engineers of Tomorrow. I remembered the emotional connection I had, how much fun it was. I felt that passion. I felt inspired when I was attending and then working at Science Quest. I was like, yep, I got to get back to that. And so that really is what prompted that fairly big move, along with just, kind of within our family too. There was a lot of considerations there, right? Like, this is a big move that we're making. Is everybody on board with this? And we kind of had to talk that through. But yeah, it really was around that kind of reflection and exploration, and then finding a way to connect to those emotions that I had kind of been missing out on for a while.
Okay, that's interesting. So now, as the CEO of Engineers of Tomorrow, if you were to describe Engineers of Tomorrow, I mean, I did a pretty brief description of it, but if you were to describe it as CEO, how would you describe it?
So I always start in the same way because I think what we do is a little bit different, but I kind of have to, I like to meet people where they are. So I would describe us as a STEM outreach organization because people are familiar with that. Okay, that means, yeah, you go and teach kids about STEM subjects, STEM learning. However, as you kindly pointed out, obviously we have a special interest in the engineering, in the E, when it comes to the E in STEM, which I think, to be honest, makes a lot of sense. If you kind of zoom right back out on that acronym, science, technology, engineering, and math, really the E is kind of the result, right? The S, the T, and the M, those are building blocks to get you to the E, right? Or the tools that the engineers use, the science, technology, and math to be able to do their jobs. So when you're talking about engineering, you can't ignore the S, the T, and the M because it all fits together. However, what is different about what we do is I would say that really our target audience is not the young kids we're talking to. It's the engineers. So our model is a grassroots model, Neil, meaning we use engineers, we use engineering students, professional engineers, EITs. We even have some retired engineers that are part of our volunteer community. And so where we invest our resources, our time, our energy is in making sure that they know how to talk to kids about engineering in a really innovative way and in a new way, right? We want to get away from some of the outdated messaging around engineering, being that the kind of messages I got, oh, you're good at math and science, so you should be an engineer. And the thing is, it's not that that's untrue. It's just not the whole story. It's not the full picture, right? And this is where the storytelling piece comes in, the communication, the public speaking. Like, it takes a lot of nerve to get up and stand in front of a group of grade 6s or grade 8s. It can be pretty intimidating, right? And break down a complex engineering subject. And not only that, get them excited about it, connect to some emotion. So that's where we are really excited, because we are looking kind of at a systemic level. How can we have an impact at a systemic level? So yes, absolutely, we want to inspire those kids in those younger ages and grades. But the way we do that is using people that are in the system now. And what that does is it also builds up their strengths, and it reconnects them to their passions. I have some of our wonderful volunteers will tell me, you know, they're stuck all day in meetings and they have deadlines looming, and email, their inbox is full, and it really can wear a person down. And so the reason they like to go in and talk to kids is because it revitalizes them. They remember why they wanted to be an engineer. They get to have fun. The energy in the classroom is contagious.
Okay. You know, I think you're right in the sense of math, and you know, the messaging being you have to be good at math and science to go into engineering. And while that's not necessarily untrue, that it's not the full story, although I will say hopefully the kids don't take it the wrong way and think, you know, once they get into that first year of university and in engineering, and they take that first differential equations class,
Yeah.
and it turns out to be really difficult, and
Yeah.
they're thinking, that damn woman from engineers of tomorrow didn't
Yeah.
tell me about this.
No, you're totally right. And that's a good point. We don't want to gloss over that. And that's part of the reason why connecting to a bigger picture purpose is so powerful, because we tell them engineering, it is hard. It's hard work. For some people, maybe not, right? We're not all Elon Musk or whatever, like some geniuses we know, but it's hard work. So if you can be connected to a bigger purpose or passion, like I want to, you know, reduce the carbon footprint, I want to make a change when it comes like climate change, or I want to get, I want to be the first person that figures out how we live on Mars, or whatever it is, then it makes you, provides you with the motivation to get through that first differential equation, the hard stuff. And so that's the kind of messaging that we're teaching the engineers to bring into the classroom, connecting to the social impact. There's some really wonderful frameworks, right? We have the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Let's talk about those. Let's talk to kids about those so that they can see how what they're learning sitting at their desks or at home, you know, on a screen these days too, what they're having to learn, how that is applied in a global way.
Yeah, no question. I mean, you mentioned earlier, Rebecca, about the importance of soft skills. When did you see in your life the importance of getting better at communicating with others? It could potentially be of use to you.
I mean, I saw it really early on. I think, like you pointed out, and that's a bit of a light bulb moment for me, Neil, not thinking, oh, maybe not everybody did start in a leadership role like I did. But I had to figure that out pretty early on. Talking to people, empowering them. That was my role as a shift supervisor. And I had all these wonderful technical skills I learned and brought with me from engineering school into that role. So I was able to really communicate well with the mechanics and maybe the corporate engineers that were coming into a project. So I had this ability to kind of translate things, right? But then you need people to work with you, and you need them to feel a sense of ownership and empowerment if you want things to run smoothly. And so being able to do that really early on, like, even something simple during a shift, if you have targets of like, we need to produce, I don't know, 10,000 cookies this shift. So how are we going to come together and do that as a team, right? So I think that's where it really first started showing up for me as, yeah, this is something that really can make a difference in the way I work, the culture, and productivity and efficiency, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Is speaking in front of others something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
I was one of those kids who, when you're in, I think it's grade 3, you have to start doing speeches. And then you can, like, at least here in Ontario, there's like a competition you can go through. And if you are the best one in the class, then you compete in the school, and then you go on to compete with other schools. And that was always just something that, I don't know, it clicked for me. I was like, sure, no problem. I just have to memorize these words, and I have to come up with something that everyone will be interested in. So I was fortunate in that way. And then I've been able to just refine it now, right? So from that more kind of structured approach in that classroom environment to then being in front of, at the start of a shift, you do a huddle and you want to start practicing those listening skills as well. That goes along with the public speaking. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's other things I've done to continue to develop those skills. I would say for me, it's just practice. If I have, even today, if I have an important webinar or a big event coming up, I'll do things like I'll make my notes, my talking points. I will then do a practice and record myself. And sometimes I'll use like a voice to text app or something, a tool, so that it literally is writing down what I say. So then I can go back and refine it, because everyone knows everyone has their own little things that they want to do better. The saying or do I say so, or whatever they are, right?
Yeah, no question. My mother is definitely someone who gets distracted by fillers like ums. She was telling me once about one of the podcast episodes that I did with someone, and she said she couldn't get through it because the person said damn near every other word. And it's unfortunate. I think for
me, it's I'll say That's
no, Rebecca, I don't know.
For me.
I don't know at all. You need to explain it. That's what you need to do. That's your job. So when it comes to any presentations that you do you have a process for putting them together? And if so, what is it?
Good question. I think the first step in the process is just sitting with it. And this isn't maybe something that gets talked about a lot, but the time you spend before you sit down at the computer or maybe a piece of paper and start writing it out or start populating those slides, that I think is a really important part of the process. And if you skip over that or gloss over that, or maybe just don't pay enough attention to it, then it can make it really hard. And so I know it's happened to me where maybe I have a deadline, and so I'm like, okay, I have to get this presentation done, or I have to get this slide deck done, whatever. And so I'm trying and I'm trying. It just doesn't feel like it's flowing. And I think most people have experienced that, right? Like when things are flowing, you're like, oh, this is great. Like, why doesn't this always just feels like it comes out naturally, right? Versus feeling stuck, or it feels clunky, or you have to keep moving things around. So I think just really deliberately taking that upfront time to just, like, for me, I know, like, and maybe it's the introverted part of me, but letting things rumble around in my head for a while, and until they get to a place where then I can let them kind of just flow out. And then not being paralyzed by perfection. This is another one that trips me up too. So I feel like I have to do it perfectly the first time. So if I start writing something down and then I'm like editing the first sentence, that's usually a bad sign. I like to just let it all out, like just type. Don't worry about what, if there's whatever typos or it seems like it's a run-on sentence, just get it out. And then you can go back and then refine and refine. And then I try to default to less words, as few words on the page as I can, so that I don't get caught like in the, reading a slide. And it sounds more conversational, it sounds more natural, and it actually flows when I'm doing the presentation.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of minimizing words on slides as well, because firstly, the audience doesn't have that option to read the slides, so they're more likely to listen. And then you don't have you're not going to have the crutch of reading the slides. And by you reading the slides, it's very difficult to engage people because you're looking at your slides.
It just sounds kind of mechanical, or I don't know, like it just sounds more natural if it's just coming out of you, right?
Oh, no question, because if I could have just read the slides, you could have just sent them to me. Why
Exactly.
why sit through you reading them? I could read too.
Yeah.
I went to engineering school just like you did. I could read.
Yeah.
Well, Rebecca, this has been great talking to you. Thank you for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
So our website is engineersoftomorrow.ca. If you are in Canada, we are going to be actually recruiting some more volunteers for our upcoming, it's our recruiting season. We have a program that kicks off and lines up with the school year every year. So that will be open April 1st. So engineersoftomorrow.ca for more information on that. And all the places are there where you can find me on all the typical social media platforms and contact forms and all of that.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek and creator of the online course for STEM professionals called Teach the Geek to Speak. It's a public speaking course. You can check it out at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.